It is a great honor and privilege to introduce Moshe Inbal. Your family name was Feldheim. You were born in Danzig in 1931. Moshe, thank you so much. I so appreciate, Moshe. If you could tell us a little bit about your family history and how you survived the Shoah.
Yeah. I have read the story. It's very short. I'm not going into details here, so I'll begin. Family Roots by Moshe Inbal. My mother, Zosha Zisel Kuczynski, born in 1905 in Alexandrów Kujawski, Poland, moved with her parents to Ciechocinek. There her parents, Chaya, maiden name Cohen, and Nahum had a dairy shop. She was the youngest child of three. She had a brother, Jacob, who later went to Gdansk. Gdansk is the Polish name now because Danzig is now in Poland and its name is Gdansk. And a sister, Rivka, who went to live in Lodz. Aside from this, my grandmother Chaya had three more children from her first marriage to one Moshe Brzezinski. In 1924, my mother went to her sister Ruszka in Lodz. There she worked as a dressmaker and in 1929 joined her brother Jacob in Danzig. My father, Shai Feldheim, was born in 1902 in Alexandrów Kujawski as well. I don't know much about him, except that in the Polish-Russian War of 1919 to 1921, he served as a cavalry soldier in the Polish army. He had at least a younger sister, maybe more, in Alexandrów Kujawski, with whom my mother left me as a child shortly before the war. I don't know her name. What I know is that she had she was just married, and that the young couple who was killed in the first days of war by a German bomb as they were hiding under a tree in their beautiful garden. It's okay, Eliezer? So, my father came to Gdansk in 1929 following my mother, and since they were already engaged, they married the same year in Danzig rabbinate and made their home in Langgasse, today Długie Ogrody in Polish. My father worked as a tailor out of home, and mother was a part-time nursemaid and dressmaker. There I, Max Moritz Feldheim was born in June 23, 1931. I was the first and only child to my parents, Shaya Feldheim and Zosia Kuczynski. Since their marriage was in the rabbinate and for some reason not confirmed in the city hall, mother retained her surname even at the time of her marriage. Unfortunately, soon afterwards, in August 16, 1934, my father died at the age of 32 of tuberculosis, which in those days was incurable. His name appears among the deceased in Yiddish Gemeindeblatt, Jahrgang 7, number 1 of August 31, 1934. He was buried in the Gdansk Jewish cemetery, most probably in the new part of it. My mother took me several times to see his grave. It was encircled with little white pebbles and marked with only temporary placard with no headstone. So, shall I show the pictures as well? This is me. One year old and later 4 years old.
And Moshe, what do you remember as a 4-year-old? What is your earliest memories?
Pardon?
What is your earliest memories? What do you remember? Your earliest memories?
I don't understand.
What do you remember as your earliest memories? What can you recall?
What can I recall? Only after I was about 4 years old.
And what
Before
do you?
That,
So what do you remember? Is there?
My memory?
Yeah. What do you remember?
So I'll go into more details.
Please.
My first memory is when I opened. We lived in an apartment which was how do you say? Okay, it was not the apartment which belonged to my mother.
A rented apartment?
Yeah, I rented an apartment, but it was opposite the port. Yeah.
And do you remember the apartment? Do you remember the apartment?
Yeah. It was almost empty because my mother was she was a very interesting person, special person, but she was a poor woman, and we rented an apartment opposite the Danzig port. And my first memory was that when I opened the window, I saw before me ships and boats, and it was amazing. This was my first memory. My second memory was my little where I slept, and 3 cats, a picture of 3 cats. But I was left alone because I was the only child, and the mother had to go to work. I was without a father. So when I became very angry, I broke the glass of those 3 cats. This is my first memory. We had several relatives in Danzig, especially my uncle Jacob, who had a family of 4, and his wife. His wife was named Berta, and 4 children, of whom 2 were saved. And we met them here in Israel because my uncle Jacob was a revisionist, and he managed to send at the last moment his 2 older boys to Israel. One by the name Yitzchak, we met in Israel here, and later came the other from Mauritius, because he was not allowed, both of them were not allowed to enter Israel, Eretz Israel at that time, because Israel was not yet established.
It was under the British. The British were the white paper.
Yeah.
And he went to Mauritius. They sent him to Mauritius.
What?
They sent him to Mauritius.
Mauritius. Mauritius, yeah. He was there about 5 years. Yeah. And then he came and joined his brother in Israel. And he was one of those who established the kibbutz Naot Mordechai. Naot Mordechai is in North Israel, quite near to Kiryat Shmona. Yeah. But my uncle Jacob, his wife Berta, and my 2 cousins, Esther and Tzila, were killed by during the Holocaust. I don't know exactly where, because there are 2 concentration camps, one by the name Stuttgart, maybe there because most of the Jewish community of Danzig, which numbered 12,000, were killed maybe there in Stutthof or in Chelmno, which was a much bigger concentration and extermination camp. So these were my closest relatives. Besides, we had an uncle from the first marriage of my grandmother, Chaya, by name Abraham Brzezinski, and he went to Australia quite close at the outbreak of the war to see how could he manage there, and he was willing to take his two daughters and wife with himself to Australia or maybe New Zealand. But war broke out, and he was not unable to. So his wife and two beautiful daughters were killed at in the outbreak of the war. One of his daughters was Miss Beautiful of Danzig. And so after, when the war started, he volunteered to the Australian army, and whenever there was a danger, out of grief, he was ready to be killed, but he survived the war and later managed to marry another New Zealand woman. I know, I have even photographs of them, but it's not here in this document. And they had a boy. Unfortunately, he was going to school in New Zealand, in Wellington. Wellington is was the capital city of New Zealand. He went by bus with his other children to school, and he suffered an accident in the head. So one day we received a letter from a shaliach from New Zealand, because his father, Abraham, wanted that his son come to us in Ra'anana, in Israel. So he wanted by no means to accept him. It's such a tragedy. I don't know his fame now, but of course my uncle Abraham was very old at that time, a very nice person. I have his picture as well, because we communicated sometime between him and my parents in Ra'anana. So, and besides, we had many more relatives. I remember an Passover evening, I was invited to Pesach, and we sat around a big table, and there was a rabbi or the chief family member. And he placed a big glass with wine and said, and opened the door, that, listen children, now Eliyahu Hanavi will visit us, and he will drink some wine. So I looked at the glass and didn't see any difference. So, shall I continue reading? Thank you. After that, we changed several addresses. At one time, we lived in Milchkannengasse, now Stagierna, and finally went to live with my uncle's family, Jacob Kuczynski, at Dreiergasse am Krantor, now Tokarska, at the Crane Gate. How do I know all those street names and so on? Because in 2008, I was in Poland. I visited Danzig. I visited the cities of the Städtelech where my parents were born, Shaya and Mother Ziesel. And I managed to find all the translations from the German to the Polish names, because Danzig now is in Poland. It was a very big port. Many immigrants to Israel and United States, South Africa went through Danzig. Now it's more, how do you say, it's not the same already, because the Polish constructed a new port, which is to the north of Danzig, and its name is Gdynia. So, my uncle Jacob had a shoemaker's workshop at Reipergasse. He and his wife Berta and had 4 children, 2 sons named Yitzchak and Shmuel, and 2 daughters, Zila and Esther. Being a Beitar revisionist activist, he succeeded to send his sons at the last moment to Eretz Israel. I and my mom were happy to find them after the war in Israel, but the rest of the family stayed behind and perished in the Holocaust.
Here you have a picture of the Beitar.
This is my uncle and his wife Berta, and here is Yitzchak, this is Shmuel, and this is Zila. Esther, their youngest girl, daughter, was not still born when this picture was taken. Okay? From 1934 to the start of 1938, my mother worked as a curtain seamstress at firma S. Fels at Kohlenmark 14, now Targ Venglove, and I attend school at the Yiddish Volksschule in Heilige Geistgasse. My teacher was Miriam Nachman, later Miriam Vogel, who after the war lived in Haifa, Israel, and a headmaster of school was Samuel Echt, a very famous person. There's much material about him in the internet. And he managed to escape to the United States. Here at the extreme right is my mother. Among German co-workers.
It's amazing that you have these pictures.
Yeah,
It's incredible.
My mother wanted to be a photographer. So she managed somehow to keep most of her photographs from her. Okay. Meanwhile, all the time, anti-Semitism was on the rise. It was already after Hitler, Yimach Shmo, succeeded to be a Chancellor of Germany. One day on my way home from school, 3 German boys of my age beat me and called me verfluchte Jude, which means in German, I'll say it in Hebrew because I don't remember now the English translation, Yehudon Mekulal.
It's a dirty Jew. A dirty Jew.
Not dirty, but cursed Jew. Verfluchte Jude. Yeah. I came home in tears and said to my mother, Mutti, ich will nicht sein kein Jude, which means, Mommy, I don't want to be a Jew, because we never spoke about it. I didn't even know that I was a Jew. And mother replied soothingly, Du darfst sein stolz, dass du ein Jude bist, which means you must be proud that indeed you are a Jew, because she was a revisionist. So this was This was her answer to my naive question.
How did the German boys know that you were Jewish?
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe they saw me coming out of the Yiddish Volksschule. Maybe. I don't know. By the end of 1938, Samuel Fels, who was a Jew and owner of the firm where my mother worked, was forced to give up his business, but my mother, it seems, was left without work much earlier, towards the end of 1937, I suppose. So she decided to leave Danzig. She was forced to leave Danzig because she was left without work. And joined her sister Rivka in Poland, in Lodz. As already mentioned, mother has left with me with my I was left with my aunt in Alexandrów Kujawski, which probably was the sister of my deceased father. While she was seeking work in Lodz. Rivka was either widowed or divorced. She had two daughters, aged 17 and 18. Unfortunately, I don't remember their names. Here they are at the lower picture. Eliezer, at the lower picture, the girls behind the bar, and in the middle it's me.
And this is your aunt, and we have a picture of your aunt as well. It's Aunt Rishka.
So Rivka was my aunt, and these two beautiful girls, aged 17 on the left and 18, were her daughters, my cousins. Maybe I will relate the story without reading it. So when the Germans occupied Lodz and all this nightmare began, my mother said to her sister Rivka, which was my aunt, "I'm not prepared to stay any longer here." So Rivka said to her, "What are you going to do?" And my mother said, "I'll try to cross the border to the Soviet Union with my son, which was me, of course." And my mother asked Rivka to come with her because there is no future in Lodz. But my aunt Rivka had a little shop of a dairy shop, or I don't remember exactly, and she said, "No, I'll stay behind. I'm not going with you, but take my 2 daughters with you." And my mother said to her, "I'm not prepared to take such a big responsibility to take your 2 daughters." And afterwards, and of course, my aunt Rivka and her 2 beautiful girls were killed during the Holocaust as well. And my mother couldn't excuse herself to the last day of her life that she didn't save her these 2 beautiful girls. She was suffering all the time. This memory was very hard on her mind. So thereafter, as we know, on September 1, 1939, the Germans invaded Poland, and shortly afterwards masses of Polish defeated troops, especially in wagons drawn by horses, were passing the streets day and night. But their arms were very poor. Here and there you could see a more heavy weapon, but it was very poor, with horses drawn by with wagons drawn by horses. They had no chance against the German tanks and airplanes, Messerschmitts. Lodz, which was the second, and now as well the second biggest city in Poland, was occupied on September 8, 1939. Right from the start, it was a nightmare. German trucks loaded Jewish property, shops were plundered, and in a matter of days we had to wear the yellow patch, the famous yellow Magen David.
The yellow star, the Star of David,
was not yet established, but we had to wear a yellow patch, me and my mother.
Was it an armband? An armband. It went around the arm.
Armband, right. Thank you, Eliezer. Yeah, armband. I remember an endless row of yellow armbands standing in a queue to get some bread. It was terrible. We heard rumors that several Jews were hanged in the marketplace. So after that Yeah, I know exactly, approximately, when we left Lodz, because in the middle of the city was a big statue of Tadeusz Kościuszko, which is a Polish, very famous hero. And the Germans put TNT under him, and they destroyed this big statue, not at the night, but not at the day, but at night. I'll say it in Hebrew, כדי להפחיד את העיר שהייתה ברובה כמובן פולנים, אבל היו Volksdeutsche were citizens of Poland, but by the nationality Germans. And they sympathized with Hitler and were all Nazis. Because I remember a word of Heil Hitler in such a manner, Heil Hitler, and I wondered how so many Germans, Nazis. I was already 8 years old, so I understood something, and I asked myself, how so many Germans, Nazis in Lodz, because Lodz was Polish. So after that, this happened in somewhere in August. They destroyed that big statue of the Polish hero Tadeusz Kościuszko, and afterwards, some days afterwards, my mother packed her rucksack and with her little belongings, and we arrived to the Lodz railway station leading to Warsaw. It was crowded with refugees to the brim. Volksdeutsche policemen were pushing, beating and shouting "Verfluchte Jude," a curse which I already knew very well. In the evening we arrived to Warsaw. It was heavily bombed, unlike Lodz, which was approximately safe, because it had it had a very many industries were placed in Lodz, but Warsaw they bombed, and it was almost destroyed to the foundation. So my mother found a Jewish family in a cellar, and there we stayed for the night. I don't remember exactly what happened next, but that for many days and nights we traveled in an open wagon driven by an old peasant until finally we arrived to the new German-Russian borders. There was a strip of no man's land called Pas Neutralne. The situation was this. According to the Ribbentrop-Molotov agreement, Poland was divided by the Soviet Union on one side to the east and German occupation to the left, to the west. And we arrived to Pas Neutralne, which was a no man's land quite in the middle. It were fields without any tents, and there we stayed under the open sky, and it was already very cold. Sometime afterwards, after we arrived, snow started to fall already. Temperatures were probably very low already. There, on that narrow strip, thousands of Jews, especially youths, were waiting day and night to be admitted to the Soviet Union. But Stalin was the dictator of the Soviet Union, wasn't in a hurry. At night it was already quite cold. Young Jewish boys and girls were sitting around fires, singing communist songs, the International and so on. But Stalin wouldn't listen. People tried mostly at night to break through the Soviet border, but guards and border guards, but were driven back. Many others returned back to German side, and of course we can guess what their fortune was later on. But mother stayed on. She was a special woman, very persistent. One night, as I was tightly wrapped in a blanket and fast asleep, my mother woke me up and said to me softly, "Maxian, komm," which means, "Little Max," this was me, "let's go." It was very dark and snow started to fall. I saw before me a little group of young people. Suddenly they all started to run to the Soviet side, and my mother ran after them, holding me tightly by hand. But at once the dark sky was ablaze with searchlights, and the guards pointing the butts and their rifles at us were shouting, "Parszywy Żyd nazad," meaning "lousy Jew, draw back." I know Russian. Parshivi is lousy. It was another kind of curse instead of Verfluchte Jude, which we heard before. All of a sudden, even as my mom was clutching my hand, I fell down deep into an infantry trench and started to cry terribly. But there was a kind guardsman who stumbled upon us, seeing a poor, lonely woman with a miserable little boy crying at the height of his lungs deep in the trench, let down his rifle and said to my mother, pointing his finger to the Russian side, "Idi," which means go in Russian. So all the other people, all the youth, girls and boys in our party were driven back, but me and my dear mother. Only I and my mother at that crucial moment were allowed to enter, to cross the border. After walking some distance in the dark, my mother stopped. She didn't know in which direction to go. If we proceed in one direction, we might maybe be caught by the Germans, and to the other, perhaps we might be trapped by the Russians. So she stopped. The ground was now thick with the snow, and we were close to some wood. Suddenly my mother could see among the trees a line of civilian people carrying some merchandise in sacks and so on. Behind them was a young woman carrying two heavy suitcases. As it became clear later, it was a group of Polish smugglers making their way to the Russian side, because on the Russian side nothing was left more. There was no food anymore, so those smugglers made their way from the German side to the Russian side. My mother sensed immediately that the woman lagging behind might be our savior. She approached the woman and asked her in Polish if we could join them. In exchange, my mother offered to help her out with the suitcases and paid her some money in zlotys. Zlotys is currency which was it is now as well złotys, the currency of Poland. We walked all night and I caught a cold, but we were safe now already. We crossed the border. The kind Polish woman treated us with slices of sausage, and while I was eating it, mixed with mucus running from my nose. I was still a little boy. In the morning we came to a train station which, as usual in those days, was overflowing with refugees. A freight train entered the station. Somehow we managed to mount it, and later that day all of us were placed in some refugee camp near Białystok. The conditions there were terrible, but we survived. After some months, the Russians were sending the people into the vast expanses of the Soviet Union. Mom appeared before a committee of officials and was asked, in Russian, of course, «Куда вы хотите?» «Куда вы хотите» means, where do you want to be sent? And my mother replied, to the warm countries. She had in mind Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, which was on the south of the Soviet Union, a little bit more warm, but we were sent to Siberia. Siberia, where the white birds are going on the so how we managed there in Siberia may be the subject of a different story. It's very short here. In Siberia we stayed from 1940 to 1945 for 5 years. This is the only picture
And Moshe, are you in the picture?
Huh?
Are you in the picture? Are you inside the picture? Is there a picture of you inside?
Pardon?
Do you appear in the picture?
Yeah, it's here am I. If I can, behind my all these boys and girls are Jewish who escaped to Siberia as well.
And which town were you in?
From 1940 to 1945.
And do you know the name of the town that you stayed in?
Yeah. The major city was Krasnoyarsk. It's quite in the middle of Russia now. And then, of course, but we were not allowed to stay there we were sent to some Ayeret Pituach in Hebrew, which had about 4 or 5 barracks, deep. And it was not still developed, a little town, and we were welcomed there because in Siberia the Russians didn't know yet anti-Semitism. But later on, during the war, many Ukrainians were sent to Siberia as well because Stalin didn't trust them. And they brought with themselves anti-Semitism to Siberia as well. In 1942, my mother remarried to a widower, Simcha Klinger. This is Simcha Klinger. My stepfather, but a very good person.
And Moshe, where are you in the picture?
Here, but this was much late. This was already
47. This is after the war.
What?
In 1947, after the war.
After the war, yeah. Here we are. This is a family name, a family picture after the war in 1947 already. But I wanted to show the picture of Simcha. So my mother remarried, and he had 2 boys, 2 sons by the name Tzvi and Ephraim. Unfortunately, they are not, they are deceased, both of them, here in Israel, many years ago. In Russia, in Siberia, my mother gave birth to my older and only sister at that time, Chaya, which lives now. I'll show you the pictures afterwards.
Moshe, is this Chaya over here?
This is Tova. We are jumping several years.
So Chaya is
This is Tova. She was born in Germany, in Ulm. Ulm is a very famous town in southern Bayern in Germany. It is the birthplace of Albert Einstein.
And Chaya is over here.
And this is Chaya. She was born before that in 1944. Chaya lives in Haifa now. We are in very close relations together. And Tova lives in Ra'anana. This is my mother, of course, Simcha, and this is me to the left. at the age of 16 probably, in Germany already, because we couldn't stay on in Poland. It was terrible anti-Semitism. And these are his children, Tzvi and Ephraim here.
And Moshe, were you close with Tzvi and Ephraim? Did
What?
you have a good connection with Tzvi and Ephraim? Did you have a good relationship with Tzvi and Ephraim?
Yes, yes, of course. I received ready-made two brothers, and finally I had company to play with whom I was not the only child now of my mother, and especially I was full of joy when my older sister Chaya was born. So this approximately is my story.
Can I ask, Moshe, do you remember when the war ended? Do you remember when the war finished?
Pardon?
When the war finished, do you remember when the war ended in 45?
Yeah, of course I remember. It was in Siberia. It was the 9th of May 1945, and we stayed at that time in Siberia, in Vumstroy, at that little town where I told you before. And after the Americans threw the atom bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we heard about it, but it was in August somewhere. And afterwards we, all the Polish citizens before the war were allowed by Stalin to return back to Poland. And we made all that German about a month back by train to Poland. And we were sent to a town, Stettin, which is about 40 or maybe 50 kilometers to the west of Danzig. Also a port, but it was completely destroyed. Here and there were buildings which escaped the bombs, and there we were placed temporarily. And then, and as I said before, it was terrible there, because all the mafia, Polish mafia, was sent to those western areas, because the Polish government was interested to settle their Polish people. And the anti-Semitism there was the worst that I could remember. I remember that my stepfather, Simcha, placed an axe before the door in any case. At night you could hear bombs, and It was terrible. But shlichim from Israel, from Eretz Israel, started to come, and one day we were the children were followed to Masayot in Hebrew. Masayot is trucks, and we were covered by brezent so that nobody could see us, as if these were, it was merchandise, for instance. And we crossed the Polish border and went through Czechia, Austria, and finally returned to Poland, to Wrocław, and there Jewish women gave us drink, because all the way, about 2 days and nights, we were not allowed to stop and drink some water, and we arrived completely exhausted to Wrocław. Wrocław is Breslau before the war, and there Jewish good women gave us water and cicoria coffee, and even when I made douche, how do you say douche? To clean myself.
A shower.
A shower, right. I made a shower and didn't stop to drink. So in one moment I felt that all my כל המעיים שלי התהפכו, כל הקיבה התהפכה, ומאז, and since then I'm suffering to this day of reflux. So this is the which remained after the Holocaust with me, this but I'm still alive. I'm already 92, and I have 3 sons. One is a doctor of biology from Weizmann Institute, and the other is a computer man, and the youngest works at M12. I'm happy, and I have 6 wonderful nephews? Grandchildren, yeah, grandchildren. And this is my revenge to the Nazis, actually. So,
so Moshe, if I can ask, what message do you give? What message do you give to your children and grandchildren? What message or what advice do you give?
Yeah, that Israel is the only place for Jews. We have no other land, because a people without land, without a country, is subject to another Holocaust. Maybe not in the same form, but it could happen. So we must keep this country by all means, as if these were our own eyes. And I'm still a great patriot, and this is what I tried to transfer to my sons and grandchildren.
Moshe, I just want to thank you. Moshe, really, this has been unbelievable. You're not only a great patriot, you're a great hero. You're an incredible hero, Moshe, you really are. And
I'm sorry, my English was not...
You're a great hero. You are unbelievable. And your mother was such an incredible lady. To do what she did, she was remarkable beyond belief.
Yeah.
To go to Siberia, to go to Russia, to leave with a little boy, it's such a difficult thing.
My story is much longer and more complicated.
I know, but it's wonderful. So Moshe, you should just be well, gesund, and may Visrim till 120 plus.
Thank you.
Good health and mazel, and you should just have bracha and all of Hashem's blessings. And I'm so grateful to you, Moshe. I'm really so grateful, and it's been such an honor to be here today.
We will be in touch.
And a Shana Tova and a good year.
Shabbat Tova.
And it's so wonderful to see, and your message is so important, that we have our own country and we must look after this country and appreciate it. So I want to thank you so much.
Thank you very much. You take care of all this session. Thank you very much. In
1947,
we were placed by the American army in many Jews which survived the war, Holocaust survivors, and those which escaped to Russia, were placed in camps,
a DP camp,
which before the war were Nazi camps, Nazi army camps.
I think they called them DP camps. DP camps.
DP camp.
And that's where your sister was born? Is that where your sister was born?
And there Tova was born, yeah. Tova was born.
And Moshe, can I ask, when did you come to Israel?
In 1948. So we stayed in that former army camp, and Shlichim started to come to visit. And even Ben Gurion visited our camp, and I volunteered to go to Israel before my family, and I came to Israel at the date of 8 August 1948, when Israel was already established, and it was after the Milchemet Atzmaut.
The Independence War.
What?
The War of Independence.
Yeah, and we were sent to Olim camp in Ra'anana, Beit Olim, and then we were sent, the youth, before my family joined me, I was sent to a kibbutz near Herzliya, Glil Yam. You know that place? Glil Yam. And I stayed there until my parents came to Israel in 1949.
And Moshe, did you speak with your parents about the war?
What?
Did you speak with your brothers and your parents about the war at home? Did you speak about what had happened?
Could you please shut down the nothing?
You never spoke to your parents about the war?
How did my parents know about the Holocaust there in Siberia? In 1943, there was a big place, a big hole. I remember that Jews were present there, and somehow we heard about the Holocaust, and it was a terrible shock to all those present, and me as well, because everybody hoped after the war to meet maybe his relatives, at least some people they may have known, but we came back to Poland and the train stopped in Warsaw. My parents, Simcha and my mother, went to see in Warsaw maybe some relatives or some acquaintances survived, but the city was completely empty of Jews. And then the train continued and we came to Lodz, to the Lodz station before we arrived to Stettin. And there too my parents went to see at the ghetto some place in Lodz, maybe some relatives remained, but nobody was there. And my parents came back very sad, very grieved. Whoever survived, we know about them, but most of the people we didn't hear anymore. All of them were murdered in the war. How did I meet my cousins Yitzhak and Shmuel here, but not my uncle and my aunt Berta and my cousins Esther and Zila? We didn't hear about them anymore. So this is the story.
And Moshe, you mentioned when you went back to Poland, there was a lot of anti-Semitism. There was a lot of anti-Semitism in Poland when you went back. When you returned to Poland, you felt a lot of anti-Semitism.
What did I?
A lot of anti-Semitism, a lot of...
We couldn't attend school there because I remember we went by tram in Stettin, and when we alighted, went down, Goyim, Polish, big boys, we were children, they beat us. We were not welcomed there.
And this is after the war?
They said, how is it that so many Jews survived the war? They were sure that the Germans killed all of us. It was terrible there. Only in those camps we were safe. When we arrived with that little ship as emigrants to Haifa, and so Haifa, the tears were running from our eyes. We were extremely happy. I was in my own land, and nobody could call me verfluchte Jude or parshive Žid. This is something that the young generation doesn't know, and I'm quite satisfied that my grandchildren don't know about anti-Semitism, but I don't trust neither the Germans, neither the Polish and Russians. I only hope is Israel.
Moshe, thank you so much. Ein milim, there are no words. There really are no words. Thank you so much. And Moshe, this is your beautiful family, and here's your 3 sons. You must be so proud of your family. It's wonderful.
Can I explain?
Please, Moshe, please.
This is my oldest son, the doctor of biology. This is the second, and this is the third son.
And what are their names? What are their names?
Name Boaz Inbal, and this is Yoav Inbal, and this is Shai Inbal. Shai upon the name of my father, Shai Feldheim.
And Moshe, why did you change the name from Feldheim to Inbal? Why did you more Hebrew name?
You could blame the war. It's complicated. My mother remarried, and when we came to Israel, my family name was Klinger, which is not my actual family name. So and at that time, Ben-Gurion told everyone to change his Galut name from, say, Rubinstein to so-and-so. So I changed my family name.
It was a good
as well.
choice. Inbal's a very good name. But this is, wow, this is wonderful.
And this is a part of my family. This is me, of course. This is my one of my grandchildren.
Oh, it's wonderful.
And this is my oldest grandchild. He is in he was in the army, serving tanks. And these two beautiful girls, grandchildren. They are both now in the army. She is in the 8200, which is very famous. So it's something.
And this is your
if not my dear mother, nobody of them was existing.
So true.
Nobody was left. Nobody was born.
So Moshe, this is not only your revenge, but it's your comfort.
What?
It's your nechama and it's a nekama. It's both. It's a comfort and it's the revenge.
Yeah.
This is the best way. Oy Moshe, toda rabba rabba. Thank you so much. And only nachas and mazel and bracha.